Oh, one last point there, because there is the NTB there. You know, now if you will notice, we are drowning in acronyms. You know, NTBs, and you know that you are part of an organization if you know the meaning of the acronyms. No? And but we are still in political science. Nasef, wait till you get into the military, and you are going to have nightmares with acronyms. Okay, what does the acronym NTB there means? While it is true that already by this time, most of our goods are already entering the ASEAN, other ASEAN countries, zero tariff, meaning no more tariff barriers. It is the non-tariff barriers, really, which are the major obstacles. What are the non-tariff barriers? Thailand would say, Philippines, you are selling water. I don't like the label in this water because it should contain da da da. The water does not enter the Thailand market. Or Singapore will say that, okay, we're going to import bananas from the Philippines, but make sure it is contained in a particular grade, the specifications of which would be, 10 inches like this, 20. Do you see? While the tariffs are zero, the goods cannot flow because of the non-tariff barriers, and this is really the major challenge of the region. And I remember that this also happened with our own virgin coconut oil, because coconut is our national tree. It's the tree of life for us, meaning everything about the coconut we can use from the roots up to the edge of the leaves. But the other country where we are exporting will say, how was this coconut grown? Oh, you already sprayed it with some insecticide, which is not acceptable to us. See, even if the tariff is zero, they can in fact put all the other obstacles, and the obstacles are in the NTBs, in the non-tariff barriers. And so you effectively block trade. Never mind that it is zero. Oh my gosh, I think I'm going back. I have to go. All right. Movements of services. Services would include health, insurance, investment, telecommunications, and the like. What do we want? For example, in the case of the Philippines has the slowest, one of the slowest internet, speed. And yet, for the same amount of money that our Singaporean counterpart pays, they have 20 times more. So why is this? And we're saying, how can the Singaporeans pay only X pesos, which is like, Jackie, what's 1,000 pesos in US dollars? That would be like $25. And yet in the Philippines, we pay the same amount, and we have a tenth of the speed in Singapore. And so, if we push the liberalization of services across the region, it will mean that there will be harmonization of cost of services, and that means it will ratchet up the standard in the Philippines, because Singapore will enter our market and we can buy the same speed for the same amount of money. So this is a plus. And the rest who will offer services less than this will die. We call them sudden death. Yes, there will be pluses, there will be minuses, there will be winners, there will be losers. That is the reason why government has to provide a safety net for the losers, because the losers will mean unemployment. The losers will mean when you're unemployed, you think of, you steal, you commit crime, or you do drugs, and then you have all the social problems concomitant with that. Do you see how these are all related to each other? And the services is one of the most challenging aspects of ASEAN integration, because even up to this time, our customs, our immigration, our quarantine procedures are 10 different customs, quarantine, and immigration procedures. Can you imagine how long it will take to harmonize and to set the standard? These are two very, very difficult things to do, and supposedly we're given only 5 years because ASEAN 2020 is the target deadline. This was one concerns us because labor means academics, labor means students. This is the best part really because already right now we have the ASEAN University Network. And the ASEAN University Network has stitched together, put together 30 universities in the ASEAN region where we are forming a regional consortia of academics so that, like in my university, I teach a course in geopolitics. We'd like to make sure that when that course is taught in Laos, in Myanmar, then it would have basically the same syllabus. In other words, the students can therefore study across the region and will have automatic accreditation because we make sure that the courses syllabi are basically, would have basically the same content. The faculty also will move because there is what is called the mutual recognition agreements. It has not reached us yet because it is very, very difficult for academics to really come together and say that your PhD is equivalent to the PhD of X university. Because we are so tariff conscious and we have carved out our own territory and we would not like anyone telling us that yours would in fact be lower than or above a mutually agreed standard because we don't know what the standard would be. And we would not want Singapore to set the standard, by the way, all the time. Yes, in some parts, yes, but in some other parts, I think we will have to talk about it. So right now, there are mutual recognition agreements already for architecture, meaning architects now can practice in the region, dentistry, accountancy, auditing. But while there are MRAs in these various professions, because you have not harmonized the quarantine, the customs, the immigration, the visa, and the passport, these are all would mean physical entry and exit from these various countries, then the MRAs still have a long way to go. But the ASEAN University Network is one, I think, with a faster velocity. Why? Because my university is one of the leaders in the ASEAN University Network. And what we're doing is we are starting with the less sensitive areas or disciplines. And it seemed like international studies and political science would be less sensitive. Why is that? Because most of us copied from the United States of America. And so that means that if you look at our curricula, and even if you look at our course descriptions, many times we copied from Princeton or University of Chicago. Of course, we're trying to change that. But yes, because a lot of us, and that's almost like, well, I don't know whether it's planned or it just happened. Like in my department, and there are 36 of us, there is only one, unfortunately, who did his PhD in Europe. The rest of us were sent to the United States of America. Why is that? Because it was only the US which gave us the opportunity to do the Fulbright. Do you see soft diplomacy? And it paid off because that means we went back to the University of the Philippines and preached the religion of liberal democracy in the US. And that's soft diplomacy for you, and I think China is doing that and it's planting, Confucius Institute all around the world. Do you have one here?
Yeah, there's only an Asian Studies Department at Wasatch University and also at the METU.
And the mentor.
Nothing but the Chinese
No,
myself.
Yes. But that is soft diplomacy for you, and I think they are really following the Fulbright framework. Nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, I also followed that framework when I was the president of the National Defense University in the Philippines. One of the first things I worked on is for the military in the region, including China, our ASEAN partners, Korea and Japan, to come to my college and to study there for 1 year. Why did I want that? Because if you are seeing each other every day for 1 year, then somehow you will become friends, isn't it? Then somehow we are going to understand each other's differences, and somehow we will have some shared meanings. That was really the intent there. And usually the ones who come to my college are the full colonels about to become generals who will earn their star and their stripes. And before I left the college, I had 3 full colonels from Beijing, from China, supposed to come to our college, and there were 3 full colonels from the Philippines supposed to go to National Defense University of Beijing. Well, what happened after I left, because I was the only civilian woman president and broke the tradition of military and male presidents there. Of course, the one who replaced me was also male and also was an admiral in the Philippine Navy. And what did he do? He aborted all my plans. And I said, oh my Lord, can you imagine? If those colonels had studied in the college, maybe we will have less problems with China, who is claiming the whole South China Sea as its lake, national lake, because those colonels would now be full-fledged generals, isn't it? And we would have planted goodwill in the National Defense College. This is not a joke, this is really what we intended to do. And this is part of the skilled labor movement that we're talking about. And so we have seen 3 already. And as I said, I will not talk about the nitty-gritty, so we'll have some room for discussion. You have a very thick document here, which I will email to NASEF, and it's very thick, especially for those who might be doing, because I have put together all the data about what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about it in broad strokes, just to give you an idea of what it looks like, but the numbers are here. And the numbers are mostly in the north, less on the south, and I would say that ballpark, we have something like 60% across the movement of goods, across the movement of services, and across the movement of labor. When we move towards ASEAN 2020, are we thinking of forming a United States of Southeast Asia? Far from it. Because all of us are young countries, are young, just liberated countries from the colonial masters. And we would be hard pressed to really give up our freedom, which we're just starting to become independent countries. And therefore, what does it mean to go regional? It doesn't mean that we are breaking, all the nationalness about each of us, about the uniqueness and discreteness of each of us. It simply means that we gave the full authority for our governments to cooperate and to coordinate and to collaborate and to communicate with the rest of the ASEAN countries, because it will make us better as peoples and as countries. I think I will end there, Nazaf, and I will be now open for questions from the floor.
We have several questions, and I also have questions.
You'll need the roving mic.
So probably you can just speak louder. Perhaps.
Yeah, maybe we don't need
Hello.
but except it's being recorded.
I think it's being recorded. So
Yeah.
Hello. First of all, thank you for being here. My question is in relation to the recently completed Trans-Pacific Partnership. What are the Philippines' chief concerns? What do they want to gain from it? Is it allowing for the free movement of goods as well as people and labor? And then mostly, what does the Philippines want to gain from it?
Yes, it's a good question. The question is, now that the Trans-Pacific Partnership has finally been approved, 12 countries washed by the Pacific Ocean, some of them. What does it mean in terms of ASEAN 2020? Well, first of all, despite the claim of the American ambassador when I asked him pointedly about this, actually we were not invited. We wish we were, but yes, we were not invited, and we're not a member. So I don't know how Obama chose who should be members. There are 12 of them. But this was a struggle because Japan did not want to give up its rice dominant, did not want any different rice to enter the Japanese market because rice is a political issue in Japan. It's an economic issue. And if you notice, those of you who have lived there or have visited their dances, their poems, their legends, they're all related to rice. In other words, the soul of the nation